Okay, this is English 250, week 7, part 7. Okay, so back to Wordsworth. I had to switch headphones. Okay, so Wordsworth's point, the poet for Wordsworth is sort of is more sensitive than other people. He's more sensitive to feeling what other people feel. But previous centuries would have said the poet was like a special person touched by the gods. But for Wordsworth, a poet is anybody who just chooses to listen and try to have a big heart and feel what other people feel. And again, some of you are like, of course, that's what poets are like. The reason why you think that is because Wordsworth invented it. He invented it. The things that you think of as true forever in all countries and all times usually were invented by somebody who had an idea and wrote it down, and other people believed it, and then it became normal. But somebody came up. That's the power of this kind of class, and any really college education, is to teach you sort of where things come from so that you understand the world you live in isn't just like this. Somebody made it like this, which, by the way, means you could make it a different way if you wanted. That's the real power of the college education, but that's a bigger point. I may talk about that more later. We'll see. I don't know. Okay. So Wordsworth here says, he says that people are kind of more, he rejoices more in the spirit. Yeah, okay. To these qualities, here's an important bit. To these qualities, he has added a disposition, meaning he's a certain type of person, to be affected more than other men by absent things as if they were present. So more than other people, the poet is affected more than any other men. He has a disposition, he's a personality type, to be affected more than other men by absent things as if they were present. An ability of conjuring up in himself passions which are indeed far from being the same as those produced by real events, yet especially in those parts of the general sympathy which are pleasing and delightful, do more nearly resemble the passions produced by real events than anything which, from the motions of their own minds merely, other men are accustomed to feel in themselves. Whence, and from practice, he's acquired a greater readiness and power in expressing what he thinks and feels. So poets, they think and feel like everybody else, but they can express it better. And especially those thoughts and feelings which, by his own choice or from the structure of his own mind, arise in him without immediate external excitement. Okay, here's the important part. He has a disposition to be affected more than other men by absent things as if they were present. An ability of conjuring up in himself passions which are indeed far from being the same as those produced by real events, but they resemble the passions produced by real events. So what is he talking about? We can use the word imagination to mean a lot of different things. Sometimes you use imagination, you think about science fiction or fantasy things where people think up creatures and monsters and horror movies with crazy monsters and ghouls and stuff, and that's a good imagination. What Wordsworth is talking about here is the ability to imagine what other people are feeling. He is affected by absent things as if they were present and can conjure up feelings which are not connected to real events. This is a big part of what makes Wordsworth run. Is for Wordsworth, the poet is super sensitive, and it's not just that when the poet's girlfriend sort of dumps him, he feels extra bad, and that's true. For Wordsworth, if the poet gets dumped, he feels it a lot, and he's able to express how he feels. Awesome. But what really, the really crucial thing the poet has, when you talk about the imagination, is that the poet can imagine what someone else might be feeling and feel it just as hard as they do. That's trickier. That's what Wordsworth means when he talks about the imagination. That's what he's talking about, is the ability to imagine what someone else feels. So for Wordsworth, I mean, he's totally cool if you get dumped and you write a poem about being dumped. But what he really thinks the poet should be able to do is if your friend gets dumped and has their heart broken, you, the poet, should be able to feel the way that they feel, the dumped person. Feel it in your heart, and then you can use that sympathy to create a poem about romance and love and heartbreak. So it's not that you have to feel it personally. You could feel it personally. That works. That's a perfectly good way to write a poem, says Wordsworth. But you know, you're going to be limited just to yourself. So for him, you might imagine characters, but then you have to feel real feelings to go along with the fictional characters. You want to be able to imagine what they're feeling and then express that feeling like it's yours. Because what you're really doing when you're writing a poem, says Wordsworth, is you are imagining a situation, but your heart is so big and your ability to feel is so excellent that you feel what the characters feel. If the characters feel sad, you feel sad. And then when you write for them, it feels like real emotion because you are feeling something they are feeling. So it's almost like a real emotion. The best thing to compare this to in kind of the modern day world is what's called method acting. I have some things to say about method acting. In the old days, acting was getting up on a stage and you pretend shit. You just pretend. Acting is pretending, acting is faking, acting is lying. In fact, the word for actor in ancient Greece was hypocrite. I don't know if I said this already. Because if you know, hypocrite is somebody who says one thing but does something else, so they tell you, like, sex is bad, but then they're having a bunch of sex. It's hypocritical because they said one thing and they're doing something else. But that word hypocritical in ancient Greece was the word used to refer to actors, because they say, I'm Batman, but they're not really Batman, they're lying. They're really Jeff Glock and they're pretending to be Batman. So for a lot of the history of acting, acting was pretending. And it was fake, and it was almost supposed to be fake. People were fine with things being a little artificial and fake. It's not necessarily, if you think being fake is bad, you learn that from Wordsworth. Oscar Wilde loves fakeness. But method acting is a kind of acting that got very popular in like the 1950s and 60s, and 60s, I guess, with like Marlon Brando, if you know your movie history, was sort of the big, oh man, mosquitoes. Marlon Brando made it really popular. But the idea of method acting is that you really feel what your character is feeling, and it makes you a better actor because you're almost brainwashing yourself or heart-washing yourself. You're changing your heart to match the character so that you really feel what they're feeling. So for example, there's this terrible movie, please don't see it, it's very upsetting, but it's called Dancer in the Dark. And it's a movie, Bjork is in the movie, she's the singer primarily, but she's an actress in this movie. And she's going on death row, and she's gonna be killed. Well, the story goes that Bjork got so into playing this character that she actually thought she was going to die. Like, she thought it was so real they were gonna kill her. And so when she's crying in the movie, when the character is crying in the movie, the actress is crying because she's starting to think she's actually going to die any second now. And so what you're seeing when you see a movie is Wordsworth would like that because you're seeing real emotion on screen. But this becomes a problem with certain male actors who talk about how, like, oh, playing this role is really difficult because, like, when I got in this character's head, like, how can I even get out again? And this became a thing surrounding Heath Ledger, who played the Joker in Dark Knight. Is Heath Ledger, relatively soon after Heath Ledger played the Joker in Dark Knight. And the Joker is a very dark, nihilistic, empty, cynical, dangerous character. And then a couple months after the movie was over, Heath Ledger committed suicide. Completed suicide. You're not supposed to, by the way, I learned this kind of recently, but you're not supposed to say committed suicide, because committed is the word we use for criminal acts. You committed bank robbery or you committed assault. So if you say committed suicide, it's like they're criminals, and I mean, they may technically be criminals, but like, probably should be nicer, because usually when people commit suicide, it's because they have serious mental problems, and you don't want to make it like a crime. They're not criminals, they're suffering people. See how oversensitive I am? That's Wordsworth. Completed suicide. Anyway, the point is that Heath Ledger completed suicide. Completed suicide is a way of saying committed suicide, but without moral judgment. And I don't want to be judging people who are dealing with like very serious mental issues. So the problem is, I don't really want to morally judge anybody when it comes down to it, but okay. People always want me to. So the point is that some people were like, oh, Heath Ledger got so into the role, he felt what the Joker felt. He got connected to that emptiness, and he was feeling what the Joker was feeling, and that made it. And I think this is a mythology, and I don't really agree with this, but that was the story, and why the story stuck was because Wordsworth taught us that that's what art is. It's feeling intensely what other characters, even fictional emotions, suddenly become real, because that's what Wordsworth is interested in. He wants to make stuff up, but he wants the emotions in them to be real, because the emotions for Wordsworth are the most important thing. All right, see you in the next video.